Hi, I'm Blake Lively, and I'm going to be taking the BuzzFeed quiz, which iconic Blake Lively character?
The legal saga surrounding the film adaptation of It Ends With Us has become a landmark case exposing the high-stakes, ruthless dynamics of Hollywood power, where the immense leverage of A-list actors, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, is alleged to have been deployed against the film's original director and primary financial backer, Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer Studios. This dispute, articulated through voluminous and explosive court filings, centers on the alleged hijacking of a $30 million production, claims of extortion, and the confirmation of recorded phone calls documenting coercive demands. The central claim by Wayfarer is that Lively and Reynolds orchestrated a calculated campaign, not simply to negotiate creative changes, but to systematically seize control of the project, marginalize its creators, and ultimately redefine the film as their own, all while Wayfarer bore the financial risk. This conflict, set to culminate in a trial and the unsealing of crucial evidence, has laid bare the ethical chasms that open when star power meets corporate desperation in the film industry. The financial and creative foundation shattered by alleged usurpation. Wayfarer Studios and its financier, Steve Sarowitz, established the financial bedrock of the film, investing an estimated $30 million and spending years developing the script and securing the intellectual property, IP. Sony's subsequent involvement was strictly as the distributor, handling marketing and theater placement, but contributing nothing to the initial production costs. A critical distinction that underscores the audacity of the alleged takeover. Wayfarer's court responses detail how, following the initial financing, Lively allegedly initiated a focused campaign during the film's second production phase to dismantle Baldoni's authority. This campaign was not subtle. It allegedly involved wresting complete control over the editing, post-production, and marketing processes, effectively sidelining Baldoni, who was the director, a star, and the driving force behind the adaptation. Sarowitz provided stark testimony, alleging that Lively actively fired key personnel, including the editors, composer, and an assistant producer, all critical roles integral to the film's original creative vision. Furthermore, Lively allegedly demanded that Baldoni's directing credit, the film by credit, be removed, a professional and personal slight that Wayfarer argues demonstrates an intent to erase the original creator's connection to the work he developed, financed, and directed. These actions, which transformed the final cut from Baldoni's version to a version reflecting Lively's demands, represent what Wayfarer has described in court as a corporate act of theft, coercion, fraud, and extortion, asserting that such a hostile takeover of a non-financed asset would be prosecuted in any industry outside of Hollywood. The weaponization of star power, threats, leverage, and the role of Ryan Reynolds. The coercive leverage underpinning this alleged hijacking was the direct threat to the film's financial viability, specifically through the weaponization of Lively's contractual obligation to promote the movie. Wayfarer claims Lively's team made it clear that if her escalating demands for total creative control were not met, she would not participate in marketing of the film. For a major theatrical release, the absence of a globally famous star like Lively, particularly one tied to the source material, is a guaranteed financial disaster for both the distributor and the financiers. This threat, Wayfarer argues, created an existential crisis that forced concessions from Sony and Wayfarer alike. The influence of Ryan Reynolds in this dynamic is cited as central. Wayfarer claims he leveraged his colossal power, derived from the $1 billion-plus success of the Deadpool franchise and his status as one of Hollywood's highest-paid actors, through his agents at WME and his direct relationships with Sony to pressure the production. Reynolds was allegedly running his mouth all over Hollywood to force Baldoni and Wayfarer to concede. Wayfarer explicitly blames Sony, the distributor, for enabling the hijacking, arguing that the studio, facing internal executive chaos and financial anxiety after recent film losses, hedged their money on Blake and Ryan, prioritizing star retention over ethical commitment to the original financiers, thus allowing the actors to exert influence far beyond what their distribution contract should have permitted. The indisputable evidence, recorded phone calls confirming coercion. The most damaging evidence to emerge in the court proceedings is the confirmation of recorded phone calls made by Jamie Heath, the general counsel for Wayfarer, which allegedly document the coercive demands made by the Reynolds camp. In a detailed deposition, Heath testified that he recorded a critical call with an agent from WME, the shared talent agency, where the agent dictated a letter from the Reynolds. The content of this letter was reportedly a shocking demand that Wayfarer issue a public statement taking full blame for the set discord, a scripted act of public self-immolation where they would confess to being not man enough and accepting that the problems were all our fault. Keith recorded the call because he could not believe what was happening and required objective documentation of the extortion attempt. Additionally, Keith confirmed recording a call with Sony Marketing related to navigating the chaotic premiere situation, which Wayfarer believes proves Sony was beginning to side with the powerful stars. The existence of these contemporary, recorded pieces of evidence transforms the dispute from a simple he said, she said argument into a high-stakes legal battle with hard proof of the alleged threats, coercion, and manipulation, effectively undermining the narrative that the conflict was simply about creative differences or set issues. The filings include citations to discovery from both WME and Sony, indicating that the talent agency and the studio are now providing evidence that corroborates Wayfarer's claims of systemic pressure. Countering the smear campaign, Lively as the architect of her own public demise. In response to Blake Lively's motion for sanctions, which alleged Wayfarer deleted evidence and orchestrated a smear campaign, the studio launched a vigorous counter-defense, arguing that Lively herself was the sole author of the film's negative press and PR crisis. Wayfarer meticulously details how the public relations firestorm was ignited by Lively's own actions and choices, not by any clandestine operation from their side. The evidence points to 1. The premiere banishing. Sarowitz detailed how Lively locked our entire team and Baldoni out of the main red carpet and premiere, relegating them to an isolated, separate screening room. This public snubbing of the director and financiers generated immediate media scrutiny over discord on the film set. 2. The social media snub. On August 7th, Lively and allegedly the entire cast publicly unfollowed Baldoni on social media. Wayfarer contends this highly visible, deliberate action was the definitive spark that caused the surging chatter, and the resulting negative press spike occurred before their crisis PR firm could have mounted a counteroffensive. 3. The marketing misstep. Lively's decision to promote her alcoholic beverage brand, Betty Booze, with products such as It Ends with Buzz, at film promotional events was cited as a grave, self-inflicted wound. Given the novel's intense focus on domestic violence and alcohol abuse, Wayfarer argues this move generated an immediate and unforgiving public backlash, as documented in a New York Times article, proving that the negative PR was generated by her own commercial choices. Wayfarer concludes that these undeniable public actions by Lively created the crisis that forced them to hire crisis PR, not the other way around, directly challenging the foundation of her legal claims. A troubling historical pattern, prior acts of hijacking. To strengthen their claim that the It Ends With Us saga was an instance of calculated coercion, Wayfarer introduced evidence suggesting this behavior is a historical pattern for both actors. Regarding Ryan Reynolds, Wayfarer cites the conflict during the Deadpool franchise, where Reynolds allegedly hijacked Deadpool, leading to a severe creative fallout with director Tim Miller over the sequel script, resulting in Miller quitting the franchise and later describing the experience as causing PTSD. This serves to demonstrate Reynolds' alleged willingness to use his star leverage to force out collaborators and seize creative ownership. For Blake Lively, Wayfarer points to her previous film, The Rhythm Section, where her alleged fighting over the final cut with producer Barbara Broccoli of James Bond fame was so intense that the studio shelved the film for 2 years, and upon eventual release it was a massive commercial failure that reportedly lost the studio $50 million. By establishing these precedents, Wayfarer seeks to prove that their experience was not an anomaly but a predictable outcome of dealing with actors who allegedly prioritized their personal creative vision and box office profile over contractual obligations and professional collaboration, regardless of the financial detriment to the producers and financiers. The road to inevitable transparency and professional fallout. The immediate legal future is dominated by the judge's pledge to uphold public transparency. He has ruled that he will not issue summary judgments until all the sealed documents are unsealed, a decision that will fully expose the complete, unredacted testimony, the precise contents of the recorded calls, and the internal communications of Sony and WME to the public. Wayfarer views the intense legal maneuvering and motions filed by the Reynolds Lively camp, including the sanctions claim, as purely delay tactics aimed at pushing back the date of this inevitable public disclosure, knowing the evidence will confirm the allegations of coercion and extortion. The film industry is already seeing consequences. Wayfarer notes that despite their previous box office heat, both Lively and Reynolds have seen a downturn in major studio theatrical contracts since the commencement of this legal battle, suggesting that Hollywood is taking note of the severe claims of unmanageable and financially destructive behavior. The trial, scheduled for March 2026, is thus poised to be a dramatic showdown, where the immense financial power of celebrity will face the cold, documented evidence of recorded threats and systemic professional warfare. Would you like me to elaborate on the specific allegations regarding Justin Baldoni's past comments on consent, and how the Reynolds team allegedly used them in the public dispute? The dispute was punctuated by an intense, private showdown at the New York apartment of Lively and Reynolds in January 2024, just one day before filming was set to resume after the Hollywood strikes. Baldoni, in text messages later filed as evidence in court, described the encounter as traumatic and an ambush that left him emotionally paralyzed. The berating by Reynolds. Baldoni texted actor Rainn Wilson that Ryan Reynolds was talking to me like a 5-year-old and scolding me. Reynolds allegedly read a list of allegations from his phone, many of which Baldoni claimed were loosely based on events, but taken completely out of context. The messages reveal the extreme pressure Baldoni felt, stating, "The words creepy and abuse were used to describe his behavior." The demand for a scripted apology. According to Baldoni's text messages, he was presented with a written apology that he was expected to read aloud and that he struggled to deliver, writing, "I prayed and prayed and prayed for the words and they didn't come, so I felt abandoned by God in that moment." The director said his brain was struggling because what I wanted to say and do was run and blow this whole movie up because I feel this was so unjust. This confrontation, which Baldoni claims occurred while other celebrity friends were coming in and out of their penthouse, was described by his lawyers as an inappropriate and humiliating berating. The catalyst, a question about weight. Baldoni claims the confrontation was triggered by his request to a trainer about Lively's weight. He explained that he needed the information for a specific scene where his character was required to lift her, compounded by his history of back problems. Lively allegedly took offense after the trainer relayed the question, leading to Reynolds aggressively questioning him. Baldoni claims Reynolds was angry, stern, and said in an aggressive manner, "How dare you ask about my wife's weight? What's wrong with you?" Baldoni's lawyers stated that the tone was so aggressive he felt he had no choice but to offer repeated and completely unwarranted apologies. Lively's camp, however, maintains that Reynolds was there as her representative and they were simply discussing the inappropriate conduct that Ms. Lively, her employees, and other cast and crew experienced. The weaponization of consent and the sexual predator label. One of the most contentious aspects of the legal battle is the alleged use of Justin Baldoni's past public commentary on masculinity and consent to label him a sexual predator, a term Baldoni claims Reynolds actively used in their private confrontation and spread throughout Hollywood. Baldoni's past commentary. Baldoni, in his public life and through his book, has often spoken on themes of toxic masculinity and the need for men to evolve their understanding of consent. He has reflected on his youth, admitting there may have been times he crossed boundaries and lines when it came to consent in a less aware time, comparing this to a societal shift where asking to kiss someone is now the norm. The alleged weaponization. Wayfarer's legal defense argues that Reynolds and his team deliberately cherry-picked and twisted these vulnerable, reflective quotes about learning from past mistakes to paint Baldoni as a current and intentional predator. One Reddit user noted that Reynolds' motion to dismiss kept using Baldoni's quotes against him, to mock him for being a predator, which his attorneys claim Ryan truly believes. Wayfarer contends this is a cruel and manipulative tactic designed to incite severe public backlash and permanently destroy Baldoni's career, arguing that Baldoni's self-reflection on youthful ignorance does not equate to the highly criminal term sexual predator. The hypocrisy claim. Comparing Baldoni's past to Reynolds' public conduct. Wayfarer and Baldoni supporters highlight what they see as striking hypocrisy in Reynolds' accusations by pointing to Reynolds' own publicly recounted conduct on a film set. The change-up incident. Reynolds himself publicly recounted an incident from the set of the 2011 film The Change-Up involving co-star Olivia Wilde. In a scene where he was scripted to remove her top, Wilde was wearing pasties with smiley faces drawn on them. Reynolds said that after the scene ended, and the pasties had transferred to his hands, he put his hands back on her breasts, in a moment he described as panic and embarrassment. This incident, which many commentators describe as an admitted act of groping after the scene was over, is seen as directly contradicting Reynolds' high moral stance against Baldoni. Critics argue that while Baldoni's reflection was on generalized, youthful boundary crossing, Reynolds' own story is about a specific, unscripted physical act on an adult co-star in a professional environment, yet only Baldoni was aggressively labeled a predator. The nice pool allegation. The level of personal animosity is further illustrated by Baldoni's legal team requesting Marvel and Disney to preserve documents related to the development of the character Nice Pool in Deadpool and Wolverine. Baldoni's lawyers have alleged the character was created in Baldoni's likeness to mock and harass him, with some social media users claiming, though unconfirmed in official filings, that the character may include a prosthetic nose to specifically mock Baldoni, who is Jewish, indicating an intentional and highly personal campaign to inflict humiliation. Conclusion: a clash of power and accountability. The legal conflict over It Ends With Us has become an extraordinary case study in Hollywood's star system, where the immense financial power of an A-list couple is allegedly leveraged to destroy the creative, financial, and professional standing of a director/producer. The use of recorded evidence and the direct, high-pressure confrontations demonstrate a level of personal involvement from Ryan Reynolds that goes far beyond typical studio politics. Baldoni's path forward is now confined to defending himself in Lively's active lawsuit, scheduled for trial in March 2026, and waiting for the judge to unseal the evidence. The outcome will not only determine liability in a massive lawsuit, but will also set a precedent for whether the recorded coercion of a star can successfully overcome the documented financial and creative contributions of a film's actual creators and investors. The public is now waiting to see if the recorded threats prove sufficient to expose the alleged corporate extortion and manipulation at the heart of the It Ends With Us debacle.